a lot of people modern day think of you as Jeff from the Overwatch team.
My name is Jeff from the Overwatch team. I'm Jeff from the Overwatch team. I'm Jeff from the Overwatch team.
But y'all must have forgot. You were the game director of WoW in an era when WoW was one of the biggest games in the world. Just, looking back, what wisdom can you draw from that time when you got to experience this era of gaming that changed gaming forever, where it's millions of people playing this video game?
It was my first game I worked on, and I joined it as this entry-level dude.
Yeah.
I still have my offer letter from Blizzard, which was for $35K a year. That's what I was making. And very shortly after WoW shipped, Alan left his lead before the beta, or like right around the beta. And then Rob took over as the lead designer. And then he left the team very shortly after WoW shipped to go start StarCraft 2. And he put myself and Tom Chilton in charge. Tom is a designer he was a great partner of mine and a great leader. And he actually came from Ultima Online. And so I always looked up to Tom because he had a lot more experience than I did. And this is like early 2005. The world was on fire. The servers were barely running. WoW had taken off like gangbusters. And they basically put me and Tom in charge of WoW. And at the time they promoted me, my title, I didn't even have a lead title. My title was senior game designer. And Tom and I were running the design of WoW at that time. So I thought it was totally normal. And I thought what we were experiencing with WoW was just normal for making a video game because it was the first video game that I had worked on.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was the funnest joyride because we were working on WoW. We were still working insane hours. And then I'd get home, eat dinner, and then me and my wife would log in and play WoW, for 4 hours. And then I'd go in the next day and I'd work. And it was just my whole life was World of Warcraft. And I loved it. Like I loved everything from, the creative meetings with Chris Metzen and just what an inspiration and muse he was, down to the simplest, dumbest design stuff that like we as game designers, like you want to talk about why a button is in the lower left versus lower right and what does that mean? That's like 2 hours of discussion. And is there a better way? Like the 10,000 minutia problems were thrilling to me. And then also the big disasters, like I had, in the early days of WoW, we didn't really have all the processes in place for like how to deal with being a successful online game. And I literally had GMs, like game masters, these are customer support guys, calling my home phone at 3 a.m. Like I remember this one time there was some faction token in Stranglethorn Vale, and they figured out a way to exploit it. And this GM calls me panicked. It's 3 a.m. He's like, I'm just spawning, what did we call them? Guardians of Blizzard. They were these giant infernals that we just made that instantly death touched anything. We used to have them when we were in the beta, like off in the distance of places players weren't supposed to get in case they cheated their way there. Mm-hmm. And this GM is just spawning them all over Stranglethorn Vale because he's worried because the players are exploiting. And it's like 3 a.m. and I'm talking in hushed tones because my wife is sleeping right next to the bed. I'm doing this because it was actually like before the cell phone days when I actually had a landline. But that's just how, and I loved it. I loved the thrill of those big moments, the minutia. And I felt like through the running WoW Live, which was me and Tom together with an amazing team, we kind of learned how to be the WoW team.
Mhm.
And putting WoW in a box and shipping it was like only chapter 1 in a 12 chapter book, essentially. And that first how to run the game, how to patch it, what type of content, how to deal with emergencies, what should our customer support be like? I mean, we would debate, should we have a launcher or not? You know, in the early days, the only reason the launcher existed in WoW was to run anti-cheat on your machine. And we had a moment where we figured out how to put that into the game and out of the launcher. And it was the first time I ever really had an in-depth conversation with Mike Morheim. He's like, "You got to bring the launcher back, guys." And we're like, "Why?" He's like, "There's no better way for us to talk to our players." And I remember trying to hide the launcher. And to this day, Mike was right. Like, that launcher turned out to be the best thing we ever had. That's essentially what BattleNet has morphed into these days. But all those decisions, and when it came time to make Burning Crusade, you know, at that point, Tom and I were leads. We were full. They had actually promoted us. There were two big exoduses of groups that quit Blizzard. They were disenfranchised. Um, if you can believe it, like, we just shipped World of Warcraft, and this whole group just walked out the door. I was actually sitting, my desk faced Morheim's office, and I watched them all go in and quit. And they were the group that formed Carbine, which made the game WildStar. Ended up taking them 10 years to make. And they were just really unhappy with World of Warcraft, and they were unhappy with, I don't know what they were unhappy with. They were unhappy enough to walk out the door right after we had shipped WoW.
That's incredible. But what is it? Just because they put their heart and soul in the game and they maybe get exhausted in a certain kind of way?
Yeah, and I don't wanna it's not fair of me to speak on their behalf. I think they were promised some compensation that they didn't immediately see. I don't know if the game, like, here's the weird part when you make a game. When you come up with the idea and you start pitching it to people, that's the best the game is ever gonna be. And then you work on it, like, you know, games I've worked on take 5 years. You know, Overwatch was 2.5, 3 years. Every day you get close to ship, the imagination of the ideal game gets farther and farther from the reality, and you're always shipping this, like, greatly sacrificed thing that nowhere near matches the imagination
Mhm.
of the inception of the idea. So you become disenfranchised with the concept
So
over time.
in some sense, you're constantly in a state of disappointment. You're basically shipping a lesser thing than you've been dreaming about. So you're doing
Yes.
less and less and less, saying no and no and cutting and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's difficult, psychologically difficult, but nevertheless, the result when you zoom out is one of the greatest games of all time that millions of people played for thousands of hours. It's just what did you ever have an experience, a realization how huge WoW was? In terms of not like statistics on the server and so on, but the cultural impact it had.
The first time was the first BlizzCon, which was in 2005. So when WoW shipped, and this is so weird to tell people, but on the team, uh, not everyone, but a lot of us were very demoralized after WoW shipped. There were there were all sorts of issues with the servers because the game did way more successful than we expected it to do. And the server load was just nuts. Like, we were doing our best to hire database programmers, you know, because we just didn't know how to deal with this sheer scope of the game. But when you're an individual, like, and at that time, like I mentioned, there were multiple exoduses of people who quit Blizzard. They went and formed a couple notable studios. One was Carbine, the other was Red 5. And we lost like kind of our core people. Like when Red 5 started, that was our team leader. That was Mark Kern, and our art director, Bill Petrus. They quit. When Carbine started, it was, I think, all of our animators and some of our best programmers. And like, it's really demoralizing when you lose team members like that. But then we were also underwater. Like, the servers aren't running. We're not able to keep up with demand. And we had to start putting patches out. And now we're making patches like, for a while we had one animator who stuck around, and then eventually he left also. But you're doing like, okay, we got to now do a patch without an animator. A lot of our art team was gone at that point, and you're trying to keep the ship afloat, and the morale was just in the shitter. Like, everybody felt very down on Team 2. The WoW team was called Team 2, and that we had somehow failed. And during that time, there was this idea to do BlizzCon. And the way that started was EverQuest had done these like meetups because they knew it was like a big guild social game, and people would get together at like some hotel ballroom, and you'd sit with your guild at like a banquet
Yeah.
room table. And to give credit where credit's due, I remember sitting in the meeting for what was to become BlizzCon. It was Pardo who said, Blizzard's bigger than that. We're not just one game. And I know everybody's focused on World of Warcraft right now. We should do BlizzCon. And at the time, we had a game called StarCraft Ghost was in development, and that was getting ready to show. And there was Frozen Throne, which was the expansion to Warcraft 3. But like, we knew we were going to make StarCraft 2. And then there was a lot of motion happening with Blizzard North, which is a whole separate story. But there was like, hey, we could really do a cool show. That's this BlizzCon thing. And at first, we kind of announced it, and it just was crickets. You know, when you're like excited about something, you're like, man, everybody's going to love, like, we're doing BlizzCon. Everybody's kind of like, crickets. What's BlizzCon? Who cares? And we're idiots. We're reading the forums, and the forums are just flaming us all the time. Like, there's lag on this server and can't log into that server. And that was our perspective of what was happening. And then, like I said, give Mike Morheim credit where credit's due. He kept us committed to that launcher, and they put the BlizzCon tickets on the launcher, which they hadn't done before. It was on the website. And so everybody who logged into World of Warcraft suddenly got this like, hey, we're doing BlizzCon in Anaheim. Do you want to come? Sold out instant, like instantly sold out. And when I showed up at that show, one of the most emotional things in my life, it was nothing but an outpouring of love. And up until that point, your perception was because you're just reading online. And it was the perception is such hatred because people who are passionate online, they express themselves in the harshest ways because it gets attention. You know, that's the lesson I should have learned from my early days. And it's such an unfortunate thing because then you met these people in person, and they loved World of Warcraft. And all they wanted to do was talk about World of Warcraft and hear about what was coming next and be around other people who loved World of Warcraft. And
It's incredible. It's a fascinating thing to me about human nature, and it's absolutely true. And I wish it was a thing that could be solved, but then again, maybe not. Maybe that's just the way it is. But in person, all of the people that are passionate about a particular topic, and whatever that topic is, it could be games, it could be the conferences, technical conferences. They're all mostly full of love. And just the way they talk about stuff, they nerd out. Even the disagreements are drenched in this respect and appreciation and love for the game, for the topic. And online, you're right. I don't know if it's because of popularity or clicks or so on, but it's just the way of speaking on the internet is more mockery. And
Cynical.
if you say, I love this thing, here's an apple. I love apples. I love bananas. I love fruit. Like, I love X, whatever. You just get made fun of. You
Yeah.
get, and then so what the lesson you learn from that is, well, I'm just not going to speak up when I love something. I'm going to instead speak up when I maybe how much I hate another thing that's similar to it, or maybe join in when we're making fun of a particular quirky thing about don't you hate it when bananas are too ripe or too versus like not saying calling out the elephant in the room is we're all gathered here today because we love the thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's an aspect of the internet that I think is jarring to a lot of people, depending on the game. But if you go to Discord or Reddit or so on, in the communities that love a particular video game, if you're not used to it, and I don't often go, so when I go, it's like, wow, there's a lot of like pretty intense kind of mockery and derision and so on. But you get used to it pretty quick and you understand it. I wish there was more love.